This same game parlay strategy in the NFL wins 90% of the time, and I'm going to show you how to find that in this video. Now make sure you guys stick to the end, because then I'm going to show you exactly which websites you need to put this strategy to work. Now the first thing that we want to do is we want to know exactly what type of same game parlay we're doing here. Okay, this is going to be in the NFL. Okay, it's going to be a correlation same game parlay. All right, we'll put the SGP right here for you, the way you see it. And what we're going to do here is we're going to use a quarterback and we're going to use a wide receiver. We're going to team those two up on a same game parlay. But not just any quarterback and receiver. We have to figure out exactly which ones to target and how we're going to be able to do this. So the most important part of this whole entire strategy is matchups. Okay? Matchups. You've got to have good matchups for the quarterback and the receiver to be a good correlation. So what we want to do here is we want to look for teams that are going to be in the bottom 5 for yards per completion against a quarterback. Now also, if you guys stick around, I'm going to run you through an example, a live game example of how this could work and how you could correlate this. The second thing is we're going to look at the wide receiver matchup. So what we want here is the bottom 5 in fantasy points, okay, versus wide receivers. So we want bottom 5 defenses that allow a lot of fantasy points to a wide receiver. So when we find a matchup like that, we want the yards per completion to be pretty high. So what does this mean? This means that pretty much that secondary is not that good, okay? And they give up big chunk plays. So they should give big chunk plays to the key wide receiver on that team, which also, going against a team that is bottom 5 in fantasy points, should be able to get some yardage. Now a key point here is what we're looking for, odds-wise, is we need both of these, the QB and the receiver, to have a true probability of at least 90% each. Okay? They both have to have a 90% true probability of being able to hit their prop play. Now, how you find that prop play is going to be an alternate line. Okay? You're going to be looking at an alternate line here for passing yards and receiving yards for, obviously, the correlation receiver. Now, when you put those two together, what you're going to want is you're going to want your implied odds to be lower than what the true probability is of both of those hitting. And I'm going to show you a little bit later in this video how to correlate that and how it actually looks as math-wise, so that way you really understand exactly how to get the right play down. Now let's go ahead and look at a real-life example here. All right, so real-life example, we are going to use the Steelers versus the Texans. Now, if you guys enjoy all these strategies and you guys want to shortcut every single one of them and you want the answers delivered to you daily, make sure you guys click the link in the description. All right, because this one right here that I'm showing you, probably going to end up in there. All right, so first thing we're going to look at here, Steelers versus Texans. Now, I already did the homework for you, so we're going to shortcut it here a little bit, okay? Steelers secondary, vulnerable here, all right? So they are bottom 5 in yards per completion, and they're bottom 5 in fantasy points to wide receivers, okay? So what we're going to do here is now we are going to look at the Texans, obviously, because that's who they're playing, and we're going to look at the QB wide receiver correlation here. So who's that going to be? Obviously, it's going to be CJ Stroud, and then your number 1 receiver for the Texans is going to be Nico Collins. Okay? Now, just because we got the correlation down does not mean you go and take their prop that, is just out there and you take the over on both of these. That's not what that means. We have to find that percentage of where they're both at least 90% or above and try to put those two together. So now let's take a look at CJ Stroud here. Okay? So CJ Stroud, what we want to look at is his normal line probably going to be like 220 or something like that. That's the minus 110 line. Now the minus 110 line, you're never going to get 90 plus true probability percentage. Okay, it's just not going to happen. You're never going to get that. So what we have to look at here is where we find that at is 160 plus passing yards. All right, at 160 plus, we got a 93% true probability CJ Stroud hits that. Now let's take a look at Nico Collins. Nico Collins now, on the other hand, we could find actually a pretty low number here, okay? So the number is 25 plus for receiving, and he's actually have a true probability of 100% there, okay? So he's hit this in every single game that he has played this season. So we got our correlation parlay here. Now let's see, where do the odds make sense and if this makes sense, because we still have to have an edge for it to make sense. So putting these two together, 100% and a 93%, is going to give us a true probability of 93% of that same game parlay being able to hit. Now, when you go and take a look at this seems simple, right? I mean, CJ Stroud, 160 passing yards, which is nothing for an NFL quarterback, and 25 yards for a receiver could be just one pass pretty much, right? So it looks simple, and the numbers show that it is, and it should be simple, right? So let's take what the odds are going to be when we put those two together. So when you match these two together on a same game parlay, here's your odds. Your odds are going to be minus 600, which gives us an implied probability of 85%. Okay, we have an implied probability of 85%, but we have a true probability of 93%. Okay, giving us a plus 8% edge there. So don't be scared because the odds are high when you still have an edge. And this should be what? As easy as it comes. Okay? The reason being, these odds are going to dictate what you do because most people be scared to do this. Okay? But when you're a consistent sports bettor and you're doing this as an investment, and you're doing this every single day, these are little buys that you're going to do here and there. Okay? Doesn't mean every play is going to be like this. Just so happens, guess what? This one has an edge. And yes, this obviously seems like something that would be pretty easy that you could possibly hit, right? And as easy as that may sound, you have a 93% chance to be able to hit that play. Now, it's not flashy. It's not going to win you $1 million. You're not going to be able to put down $100 and you're going to make $1,000. No, that's not what this does. What this does is set yourself up to be able to actually make some money on a bet rather than just guessing and then hoping that you win, when hoping is not a strategy. Hoping ends up losing your bankroll. That's how that works. But when you have calculated risk, that is where you actually make little gains at a time and you're able to stack those up over time. Now let's get to the websites that I promised you guys, all right? The websites are where you could find the favorable matchups. Okay, so first let's talk about the sports books. That same game parlay you could find at DraftKings. Okay, you can find that same game parlay there, but then the information now for the receiver fantasy points, okay, so wide receiver fantasy points, you're gonna look at Fantasy Pros. Okay, once you go on there, you can go defense versus position, and it'll show you the allowed points in the fantasy world that are given up to receivers, quarterbacks, tight ends, running backs, all that stuff. And then for QB, for the yards per completion, you'll look at team rankings, which if you watch some of my videos, you guys know we use this a lot for the data. Okay, you go to team rankings, and they'll show you on there the yards per completion that the defenses give up.